Now we're going to talk about process as meaning, Bach and the fugue. Now, keyboard instruments in the Baroque era also went through some technological advances, just like the woodwinds and the brass and strings. And this brought to the instrument new levels of refinement, and the musicians could broaden their technique. They were very limited before, especially with playing style and dynamics and phrasing. And The keyboards were inherently suited for polyphonic performance. So with the advancements, the keyboard instrument was able to do a lot more. Now with the harpsichord, we have string instruments that are plucked with quills. The modern day piano, we have little hammers that strike the string, but the harpsichord plucks the quills pluck the strings. And because of that, the tone is not sustained, so it dies away pretty quickly. And the dynamic extremes are not possible because once the string is plucked, the sound dies pretty quickly. So there's only little subtle little nuances that the musician could do. Next, we have the organ. And during the 1600s and 1700s, the German builders of these instruments used different sets of pipes and to give contrasting tone colors. So the larger the pipe, the lower the sound will be. The smaller or more narrower the pipe or the circumference, the higher the pitch would be. So the combination of those different sizes could give you different tone colors. And also with the organ, we have multiple keyboards, meaning we have a lower keyboard, an upper keyboard, even the foot has its own keyboard. And because of that, we can have different levels, terraced dynamics. Now, Johann Sebastian Bach, like we talked about before, he was a renowned keyboard player, and so he was sought after as a consultant to many church organ builders, and he was famous for improvisation. Now, for the keyboard forms, the musical forms, we have the toccata and fugue, and this is a free-form piece based on improvisation, and it was often written out much later. This also showcased the performer's dexterity, so how delicate or intricate the fingers could move, and there were highly contrasting musical ideas and tempos, and this is often paired in the toccata and the prelude part. They're often paired together as an organized form. For example, we have the toccata and fugue in D minor by Johann Sebastian Bach. How many of you guys have seen Fantasia? Well, the opening music for that movie was this toccata and fugue in D minor. And the fugue is a systematic elaboration of short musical ideas. So written for the solo keyboard, also we've heard it in groups of instruments as well as voices. Here we have a spectacular Baroque organ that was built in 1738 in St. Bavo's Cathedral, Haarlem in the Netherlands. The fugue and its devices. A fugue is a contrapuntal composition based on imitation. So contrapuntal meaning counterpoint, meaning note or line against line. But it's also based on imitation. So one line would imitate the other line that came before, and the same thing after that. So there are different parts to the fugue. We have the subject, which is the main theme, and it's the unifying idea, the single theme that always pervades throughout the whole piece. Then we have the answer. So we have a subject, answer. The subject is imitated in another voice. Then we also have the counter subject, and this is a different theme that's heard against the subject. And then we also have the exposition, which is the first section where the subject is presented in each voice one time. So, summary, when the music starts, we hear the subject, the first main theme. And then after a certain while, we will hear an answer imitating that subject line. And while that happens, that first subject line might move into the counter subject. And then another voice would enter, another voice would enter. And after all the voices present have had a chance to state that first subject theme, that's the end of the exposition. Then we have episodes, and these are interludes that lack the subject, and they think of it kind of like filler. The contrapuntal devices that the composer can use, augmentation. So you could take the thematic material and you can make it longer, like longer meaning proportionally. And then diminution is where you make it smaller by proportion. Retrograde is when you take the music and go in reverse. Inversion is when you flip the distance around. And stretto is a quick succession of imitation. So with all those different techniques, it can really add different colors and different timbres, different textures, weaving in and out. All right, so then we have works encountered in text. So our first example that we had so far this semester of the fugue is the Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra. And then we've also had the Messiah courses by Handel. And then Wacht auf, the opening movement by Johann Sebastian Bach. And remember, the Young Person's Guide to Orchestra was by Benjamin Britten. Here we have a picture of Joseph Albers' fugue, which is the interlocking and parallel lines that resemble the polyphonic textures of the fugue. And here we have those contrapuntal devices. The subject and answer. The answer begins 5 notes higher, so a fifth away. So the intervals have changed. So we have the subject that starts on D, and then the answer starts on A. So now we have the melody. And then we have the inversion. And then the retrograde. And then the retrograde inversion. And then augmentation. And then diminution. So those are the different contrapuntal styles that composers could use at this time to create variety and different textures and movement within the music. Now, Bach's keyboard fugues, he wrote the Well-Tempered Clavier, and this was a 2 volumes work with 24 preludes and fugues in each. And this was intended as a teaching aid that was able to present expressive and technical challenges for the students. This was written for a new tuning system, and this is the equal semitone or half steps tuning system that became more standardized today. So Contrapunctus 1, from the Art of Fugue. This has 14 fugues and 4 canons. And this was a systematic exploration of fugal devices. This also showed contrapuntal mastery, as well as ultimate achievement. And the keyboard music was also recorded by orchestra and chamber ensembles. So I have played in a brass quintet for many years, and we used to play the different contrapuncti for performances. And the thing that's really important about playing a fugue is you are listening to the other people in your group while still focusing on your part, making sure that your part comes in properly, because sometimes you just can't rely on the other instruments to like, because your part, your individual line is so separate. And so there were many times where we would crash and burn because we would get lost because it's just so complex, the different weaving lines. And if you weren't really focused on where your part was, it was really, really easy to get lost. So these pieces are very challenging, and it's just really amazing that Bach was able to create such complexity that's so beautiful and so fun to play as well as to listen to. And here we have a beautifully decorated two manual, meaning the two keyboard levels. And this was built around 1786 by a French craftsman named Pascal Taskin. And here we have a little chart here, or diagram, of the fugue. And so, for example, in measure 1, we have the subject in D minor. And then we have in measure 5, the answer, which is a fifth higher, in A minor. And while the answer is playing, the subject player starts to play new material. And in measure 9, the baritone comes back in with the subject back in the original D minor key, and the alto who started and the soprano who came in second, they're now doing new material. And then in measure 13, the tenor voice comes in with the answer in A minor, and then the baritone moves to new material. So after the tenor sings their part, then we have finished the exposition. And so for Listening Guide 18, Contrapunctus 1, The Art of Fugue, which was composed in 1749. This is a 4-voice fugue, and the fugue subject outlines the D minor triad. So if D is, if that's D, D, F, A, F, D, that's the D minor triad. It has an extended middle section with false entries, overlapping subjects, and that's the stretto. So the imitated part that are happening in overlapping sections. That's what I was saying when we were trying to play in my brass quintet, because there's so many different entrances and the parts are overlapping. It could get really easy. It was really easy for us to get lost, to get confused and where we're supposed to be actually playing and where the main theme was. And the tonic, the main home key, is reestablished, and the final answer, the final statement of the answer over the sustained pedal in the bass. And then the final chord is major. Even though this whole piece has been in minor, this is a common feature in Baroque music. If you're in a minor key, you're going to end that last chord in a major. And because of that change of that third note in that chord, we have the root third fifth. We call that a Picardy third, where even though you're in a minor key, that last chord is going to be major. And here we have the breakdown for Contrapunctus 1. And as you can see, the tune here outlines the minor chord, the D, so D, A, F, D, C sharp, D, E, F, D, F, A. That's the D minor chord. And so we hear that throughout. And then at the last chord at the end, to finally show that we're finally done, we're in that major chord at the end. And so for the texture, we have imitative entries of the same melody. So whether you're going to start on D or A, it's the same melody line, just starting on a different pitch. And here is a style summary of the music of the Baroque period from 1600 to 1750, the various composers that we talked about, and how they use rhythm and meter and harmony and the vocal genres, the instrumental genres. So this is a nice little snapshot of this period. And that's it for chapter 28 and the end of part 3. Next, we'll start with part 4 in class on Thursday.